So picture this. You're lying in bed, the alarm just went off. You open your eyes, and you have that bizarre, totally disorienting feeling of like stepping out of a movie theater where the film made absolutely no logical sense.
Oh, yeah, the classic morning whiplash.
Right, you're just blinking in the harsh morning light, and your brain is desperately trying to piece together a narrative that is just, it's already evaporated.
It fades so fast, like
Yep.
water through your fingers.
Exactly. I mean, a second ago, you were entirely convinced that you were back in high school, except the school was somehow inside a moving submarine.
Naturally.
Right. And you're late for a math test you didn't study for, and for some inexplicable reason, your current boss is there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just quietly handing out the exam papers, but,
Yeah.
Speaking entirely in French.
That is just, it's such a profound disorientation. To the waking mind, it just feels like this completely random collision of your daily anxieties, fragmented memories, and just pure, unfiltered nonsense.
Totally.
Eh.
And for you listening right now, maybe you've started trying to capture this. Like maybe you have a notebook on your nightstand and you've been writing these things down because, everyone says dream journaling is good for you.
Yeah, it's the advice everyone gives.
But then you look at the page later over your morning coffee and you read about the submarine and the French-speaking boss, and you just think, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right. It feels useless.
Exactly. You think, this is just noise. This is just my brain, like, misfiring while it cleans up yesterday's garbage. But, and this is the premise for our deep dive today, in the stack of source material we're exploring.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
So fascinating. We're specifically looking at the Seth material, the extensive body of work channeled by Jane Roberts. And there is a profoundly bold claim in there that completely shatters that assumption about dreams being random noise.
It really does. It flips the whole concept on its head.
The claim is that we actually don't have to be passive observers trapped in this chaotic nighttime theater. We can actually give our dreams a directive, like give them a job to do before we sleep.
It's a massive shift in perspective. I mean, truly. The Seth material, particularly in texts like Dreams, Evolution, and Value Fulfillment, and Seth, Dreams and Projections of Consciousness, it presents dreaming not as some passive biological byproduct, but as a highly active, creative state of consciousness.
A creative state.
Yes. Let me actually read a direct quote from the source texts, just to establish our foundation here. Seth states, quote, "Before sleep, you can give yourself suggestions that will direct your dreaming consciousness toward any desired goal."
Okay, I have to stop you right there. Could the phrasing, dreaming consciousness, is super interesting.
It implies so much, doesn't it?
It really does. It implies that there is an active awareness present. But, I mean, as a curious beginner looking at this, my immediate reaction is just, it's skepticism.
Which is completely fair. It sounds almost too easy.
Right. We're talking about programming our dreams to solve waking problems. Like asking, tonight, show me how to navigate this career change, or help me feel more confident. Is that an actual practical psychological mechanism, or is this just wishful thinking?
I get that. But it is an entirely practical mechanism. In fact, the texts argue that it's a natural baseline function of the human psyche. We've just, forgotten how to use it.
We've forgotten.
Yeah. We tend to view sleep as a void, a period where we just power down, like a computer, to repair the physical body.
Right, just biological maintenance.
Exactly. But Seth frames the sleep state as an intensive workshop. You are not at the mercy of your dreams. You are actually their architect.
I love that phrase, the architect of your dreams.
Yeah, and the mission of our exploration today is to demystify the mechanics of this whole process. We're going to move it out from the realm of abstract metaphysical theory and translate it into a gentle, reliable bedtime ritual that you can literally use tonight.
Awesome. But to do that, I feel like we have to really demand an explanation of the mechanics.
Oh, absolutely. We need to break it down.
Because if I'm going to try this tonight, I need to know how. Like, how does a simple sentence spoken in the dark somehow organize the totally chaotic landscape of my subconscious?
Right. It seems like a massive leap.
It does. I think we need to look at what the texts describe as the relationship between the conscious mind, the ego, and the inner self.
Yes, that relationship is the absolute core of the mechanism, because throughout your waking day, your conscious mind, what we typically call the ego, is heavily, heavily engaged.
Working overtime.
It has to be. I mean, its primary function is physical survival and navigation. It manages your immediate environment. It processes all the sensory data, ensures you look both ways before crossing the street.
Keeps you from stepping into traffic.
Exactly. And it maintains your social identity. So because its job requires such intense, narrow focus, it acts as this rigid protective barrier.
It's essentially a filtering mechanism, right? Like if we didn't have that rigid focus, we'd just be completely overwhelmed by every passing thought, memory, and piece of sensory input.
Oh, we'd be paralyzed. We wouldn't be able to function in three-dimensional reality at all.
So it's necessary.
Very necessary. The ego is a specialized lens. But because it's so focused on the physical exterior, it kind of blocks out the deeper, multidimensional awareness of what Seth calls the inner self.
The inner self.
Yeah, and the inner self is the portion of your identity that is unburdened by physical space and linear time. It's vastly creative, and it possesses a much broader perspective on your life, your challenges, your potential.
Okay, so how do these two actually interact? Because right now, sitting here talking to you,
Yeah.
my ego is very firmly in the driver's seat.
And mine too. But they interact most profoundly at the threshold of sleep.
Ah, okay. As you're drifting off.
Yes. As you drift off, your physical senses begin to dim. The ego recognizes that, okay, the body is safe in bed, there are no immediate physical threats, so its intense outward focus is no longer required.
It can finally clock out.
Exactly. It begins to relax its rigid grip. The texts refer to this transition as a thinning of the veil.
The thinning of the veil. I like that. So the barrier between the highly focused ego and that expansive inner self becomes a bit more permeable.
Precisely. And in this highly relaxed transitional state, which psychologists often call the hypnagogic state, your inner self becomes incredibly receptive to conscious intent.
So this is the critical window of opportunity.
It is the window. A simple, clear suggestion given right at this threshold acts as a really powerful directive. The inner self basically takes this conscious request and organizes the upcoming dream experiences around it.
Wow. But wait, what exactly is the inner self doing with that request? You mentioned earlier that the sleep state is like an intensive workshop. What kind of work is actually happening in there?
Well, to understand that, we have to introduce a really vital concept from dreams, evolution, and value fulfillment. It's the idea of probable actions.
Probable actions.
Yeah. The source texts explain that in the dream state, you aren't just, sitting there watching random images on a screen. You are actively utilizing a psychological laboratory to test out probable realities.
Wait, probable realities, meaning like different potential futures.
Yes, exactly. Let's say you're facing a difficult choice in your waking life. Maybe you're deciding whether to relocate for a new job or stay where you are.
Right, a classic dilemma.
In the dream state, your inner self constructs these incredibly complex, immersive scenarios where you actually live out the emotional and psychological consequences of both choices.
You actually live them out.
Yes. You test the probable actions safely outside of physical time. You experience the stress of the move or maybe the stagnation of staying, and you just gather data.
So when I give my dreams a directive, when I ask a specific question before sleep, I'm essentially telling the laboratory which experiment to run tonight.
You're handing them the clipboard.
Right. I'm saying, focus the simulation on this particular career choice, or run a simulation on how to resolve this argument with my partner.
That is exactly what's happening. The inner self is always running these complex simulations anyway, constantly working toward what Seth calls your value fulfillment.
Value fulfillment.
Yeah, which is basically the inherent striving of your consciousness to explore and actualize its greatest potential. So by introducing a conscious suggestion, you're just aligning the ego's waking desires with the inner self's nighttime labor.
You're getting them on the same page.
Right.
You're asking for the results of a specific experiment to be highlighted.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes perfect logical sense. We're focusing the beam. But here is where I really have to offer some serious resistance.
Go for it.
Because this sounds beautifully cohesive in theory, but in practice, I feel like there's a massive obstacle.
The morning after.
Yes, say I do everything right, I find that hypnagogic window, the veil thins, I deliver my clear request to the inner self, and I drift off.
Yeah.
But I wake up the next morning, and my mind is a total void.
Nothing.
Nothing. I do not remember a single dream. The laboratory doors are just locked. The entire process feels like a complete failure. I mean, if the ego doesn't remember the dream, did the experiment even matter? Did it still work?
I am so glad you asked that because that is the most common point of frustration for beginners, and it's actually a fundamental misunderstanding of how the psyche operates.
Really?
Yes. The texts address this with deep reassurance. They state that conscious recall of the dream is absolutely not required for the inner work to be effective.
I find that so difficult to accept, honestly. If I don't remember the solution, how can I apply it to my life?
Because you're assuming the solution has to be delivered as this neat linear narrative that your ego can just transcribe into a journal.
Well, yeah, that's what I want.
Of course it is, but the inner self doesn't communicate exclusively in waking world logic. The work done in the dream laboratory alters your psychological framework at a root level.
At a root level, what does that mean, practically?
Think of it like a river carving a new channel underground. You don't see the water moving, you don't witness the actual erosion of the stone in real time, but eventually the landscape above ground shifts.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
The results bypass the conscious memory entirely and integrate directly into your waking experience.
Okay, so what does that integration actually look like for the listener? How do they know it worked if the notebook page is totally blank?
They look for the bleed through.
To bleed through.
Yeah, the results bleed into the waking reality in these really subtle but profound ways. You might wake up with an unprompted, unexplainable feeling of lightness regarding that career choice you were stressed about.
Like the anxiety is just gone.
Exactly. Or, you might be standing in the shower, entirely focused on the temperature of the water, and suddenly a fully formed insight about your relationship just drops into your mind out of nowhere. You might experience a sudden shift in mood, like moving from deep anxiety to this quiet, unshakable sense of resolution without ever remembering the specific dream scenario that facilitated it. The psychological knots were untied in the dream state, and your waking self just inherits the freedom of that untied knot.
The underground river shifts the landscape. Man, that takes an enormous amount of pressure off the morning recall.
It really does. It's so freeing.
But it also demands a level of trust, right? Trusting that the conscious mind is really only one small part of a much larger, highly competent organism.
It demands massive trust. And to really ground this mechanism, I think we should look at how it operated in reality, under extreme pressure.
You mean Jane Roberts?
Yes. We need to examine Jane herself.
I definitely want to dive deeply into her experience because I feel like it provides a crucial layer of authenticity to all this. I mean, Jane wasn't just a conduit for these philosophical concepts.
No, not at all.
She was a complex, highly creative woman dealing with immense human struggles. How did she actually apply this mechanism of dream programming to her own life?
Her application of it is incredibly well documented, particularly in the notes kept by her husband, Rob. Jane utilized sleep suggestions as a constant, daily practical tool.
Really? Like for what kinds of things?
Well, as a writer, she would frequently ask for clarity on complex creative projects, and the inner self would respond to these directives brilliantly.
Give me an example.
She would often wake up with entire poems fully constructed in her awareness, just ready to be dictated. Or she would receive sudden, elegant structural solutions to plot problems in her novels.
That is amazing. That's the creative application, which aligns perfectly with the idea of a dream laboratory.
Exactly.
But what strikes me as far more profound and honestly far more challenging to comprehend is how she applied this to her physical health.
You're referring to the material captured in the way toward health.
Exactly. And for those listening who might not know, Jane Roberts suffered terribly from rheumatoid arthritis.
She did. Her condition was severe.
Yeah, she experienced prolonged periods of intense physical distress, massive inflammation, immobility, and really long hospital stays.
It was incredibly difficult.
There's this deep, painful friction here because she is channeling texts that speak about the limitless power of the inner self, while her physical body is practically locked in a state of deterioration. How did her practice of dream programming intersect with that brutal physical reality?
It is arguably the most poignant and instructive aspect of her entire journey. When Jane's physical mobility was at its absolute most restricted, she would use her pre-sleep suggestions to request healing insight and relief.
And what happened?
Her inner self responded with profoundly vivid, dynamic dream experiences. While her waking body was confined to a bed or a wheelchair, her dreaming consciousness experienced total freedom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she would dream of walking effortlessly down the street. She dreamed of going into a 5 and 10 cent store to browse, just feeling the pure joy of simple, unencumbered movement.
That is heartbreaking, but also incredibly beautiful.
It really is. She dreamed of putting on new clothes, which, in dream logic, is a highly symbolic act of adopting a new, healthy self-image.
The moment the waking pain was suspended by sleep, her consciousness immediately reverted to its natural state of joy and motion.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, is that just psychological escapism? I mean,
Yes.
is it just her mind giving her a brief vacation from the pain?
The Seth material emphatically states that it is not escapism. It is not mere wish fulfillment.
Yeah, that is it.
According to the texts, those dreams of joyous movement were the body's deep, innate striving for healing playing out in reality. In those dreams, she was actively generating the psychological and electromagnetic blueprints for physical health.
Okay, wait. We need to stop and interrogate that phrase.
Mhm.
Electromagnetic blueprints.
I know, it's a big one.
That is a massive, highly technical, metaphysical claim. How does a dream about, like, buying decorations in a store create an electromagnetic blueprint, and how on earth does that translate to the physical cells of an arthritic joint?
Right. To understand that, we have to look at the underlying physics of Seth's reality model.
Okay, let's unpack it.
The texts assert that every thought, every emotion, and every psychological event generates a specific electromagnetic reality.
Every single thought.
Yes. Seth calls these EE units, or electromagnetic energy units. And these units are literally the building blocks of physical matter.
So wait, you're saying my thoughts are physically constructing my reality?
Yes. Your physical body is essentially a dense, slow-moving projection of your psychological and emotional state constructed from these EE units.
So thought precedes form.
Exactly. The psychological state dictates the physical arrangement of the cells. Now think about Jane in the working state. Her conscious mind, her ego, was completely overwhelmed by the immediate sensory data of pain.
Which is completely understandable.
Of course. The ego looks at the swollen joints and concludes, I am sick, I am immobile. But that intense focus generates E units that actually perpetuate the illness. It becomes a closed loop.
Wow, so the ego is constantly reinforcing the reality it currently perceives.
Yes. But in the dream state, the ego is bypassed. The inner self takes over. When Jane dreamed of walking effortlessly, she wasn't just imagining it. She was generating massive amounts of new, healthy EE units.
She was building a new framework.
Precisely. She was constructing a high-energy electromagnetic framework, a blueprint of a healthy, mobile body. She was feeding the cellular structure the exact frequency of wellness.
But, and this is the obvious question, if the blueprint is being successfully generated every single night, why does the physical body remain sick in the morning? Like, why the delay?
Because physical matter is dense and very slow to react. And more importantly, because the moment the waking ego boots back up in the morning, it looks at the body, feels the pain, and immediately begins generating the old frequencies of illness again.
Ah, so it clashes with the new blueprint.
Exactly. They clash. The challenge is allowing the nighttime blueprint to truly integrate into the waking belief system without the ego tearing it down.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. Even so, the text suggests that without those vital healing dream experiences, her physical deterioration would have been far more rapid and agonizing. The dreaming self was continuously providing the template of health, sustaining her psychological vitality as much as possible.
That is a staggering concept. Just the idea that in our sleep, we are quite literally forging the physical reality we're going to inhabit the next day. We are laying down the tracks.
We absolutely are.
Which brings us to the absolute core of our deep dive today. We understand the mechanism of the ego relaxing.
Yes.
We understand the inner self's laboratory of probable realities. And we understand that the results can alter our physical and psychological blueprints. So how do we actually execute this? How does the listener construct their own simple sleep suggestion tonight?
We must approach this as a deliberate, thoughtful ritual. It's not just a casual thought. Let's outline the precise methodology.
Walk us through it.
The first step is cultivating the correct environment, both physical and mental. You cannot transition effectively into that hypnagogic state if your ego is still deeply entangled in the physical world.
Which means, I'm assuming, no scrolling on a phone, no watching the news, or reviewing a spreadsheet 5 minutes before you close your eyes.
Precisely. The blue light, the influx of intense data, the emotional reactions to social media, all of this forces the ego to remain hyper-vigilant. It's like sounding an alarm.
You tell your brain, stay awake, there's danger.
Exactly. You must signal to the ego that its shift is over. The room should be dark, the breathing should be slow. You are consciously, physically inviting the veil to thin.
Okay, so the physical stage is set, the breathing is slow, we are at the threshold. What is the actual architecture of the request itself?
The primary rule of the request is singular focus.
Singular focus.
You must choose just one clear, simple directive for the night.
Okay, I can foresee listeners struggling with this immediately.
Why is that?
Because we live complex lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be dealing with financial stress, a conflict with a sibling, and a lingering health issue all at the exact same time. Why can't I ask the inner self to address all three? You said it's vastly intelligent, right?
The inner self is vastly intelligent, yes. But the suggestion is the focal point that bridges the conscious and subconscious minds.
Okay.
If you approach the threshold with a chaotic, multifaceted grocery list of anxieties, you're simply recreating the scattered, frantic energy of your waking day.
You're bringing the noise into the laboratory.
Exactly. You're confusing the directive. Think of a magnifying glass. If you keep moving the glass around, you will never concentrate the sunlight enough to start a fire.
Oh, that makes sense.
You must hold it still over one single point. Choose the most pressing issue for tonight and give the inner director a clean, uncluttered target.
Single focus. We are holding the magnifying glass still.
Yeah.
So what about the linguistics of the request? How important is the specific phrasing?
The phrasing is critical. The subconscious responds to literal construction and emotional resonance. The suggestion must be phrased positively, and it must be stated in the present tense.
Let's analyze why that is. Because if I'm dealing with a severe work conflict, my instinct is to lay in bed and say, I want to stop being so stressed about my job, or please help me not get fired.
And both of those phrases are highly counterproductive.
Really?
Yes. When you say, I want to stop being stressed, the dominant psychological concept you're handing to the inner self is stress. The subconscious doesn't process the negative modifier effectively. It simply latches onto the core image. Furthermore, starting with I want reinforces a state of lack.
Because if you're wanting it, you don't have it.
Exactly. It affirms that you currently do not have the solution. You are programming the feeling of wanting rather than the feeling of having.
Okay, that is a huge distinction. So how do we fix it?
You must phrase it as an affirmative expectation. Instead of focusing on the stress, you pivot to the desired outcome. The phrase becomes, I will dream a solution to my work challenge.
I will dream a solution. That feels entirely different.
Or, I will experience clarity and confidence regarding my career.
Let's run through a few more examples just to ensure the pattern is super clear for the listener.
Sure.
If someone is dealing with a health issue, instead of saying, please take away this pain, the phrase should be,
I will receive healing insight about my health. Or, my dreams will align me with physical vitality.
Love that. And what if they are seeking creative inspiration, like writer's block?
I will awaken with the solution to my project. Or, my inner self will provide the creative breakthrough I require. Notice the structure of all of these. They are direct, they are positive, and they assume the outcome is already in motion.
They really do. So we have our single, positively phrased directive. Now we arrive at the delivery, which I suspect is where this entire process succeeds or fails.
You suspect correctly.
How do we actually communicate this phrase across the veil?
The delivery relies entirely on the emotional state accompanying the words. The physical action itself is very simple. You repeat your chosen phrase silently to yourself just 3 times.
Wait, why 3 times? Why not chant it for 20 minutes like a meditation mantra?
Because chanting it for 20 minutes requires intense conscious effort.
Which keeps the ego awake.
Exactly. It keeps the ego active and fixated. Repeating it 3 times is sufficient to set the intention without crossing over into waking fixation. But the true key is the emotion behind those 3 repetitions.
The emotion?
Yes. The texts are completely explicit about the rules of engagement here. The inner self does not respond to force.
This is a fascinating paradox. We are trying to achieve a highly specific goal, but we cannot, try too hard.
It's the difference between egoic demand and conscious collaboration. You cannot bully, command, or threaten your subconscious mind.
If I clench my jaw, tense my muscles, and aggressively think, I will dream a solution, I have to fix this tonight, I've messed it up.
You've instantly engaged the ego's survival mechanism. The veil thickens immediately. The inner self retreats from that kind of coercion.
It reminds me of trying to coax a frightened animal out from under a porch.
Yes.
If you reach in and try to drag it out, it's going to bite you, or it'll just retreat further into the dark. You have to sit quietly, hold out your hand, and allow it to come to you.
That is a beautiful, deeply organic analogy. You must deliver the phrase with a profound feeling of gentle trust. You are handing a complex problem over to a deeply capable, wise partner.
A partner, I love that.
You state the phrase 3 times, imbued with the quiet confidence that the message has been received. And once you have delivered it, you must perform the final, crucial step.
You drop it.
You surrender the outcome.
Yes. You do not lie there waiting for the dream to start. You do not try to micromanage the narrative of how the solution should look.
You don't try to direct the movie.
Exactly. You have planted the seed in the fertile soil of the subconscious. Now you step back and allow the sleep state to water it. You simply let go and drift into sleep. Plant the seed and leave the garden. It's a profound exercise in relinquishing control, which is honestly the very thing the waking ego fears most.
It's a surrender.
So we have the nighttime protocol fully established. Single focus, positive phrasing, gentle trust, surrender. The seed is planted. Now we must discuss the harvest.
The morning protocol.
The alarm goes off. It is morning. What is the immediate action for the listener?
Preparation for the morning actually begins the night before.
Oh, really?
Yes. You must have a designated space to capture the data. A blank notebook and a pen must be right next to your bed, literally within arm's reach.
Because if you get up,
You lose it. You do not want to be searching for your phone, unlocking screens, or turning on overhead lights. All of those actions violently pull the ego back into physical focus, which immediately wipes the delicate remnants of the dream state.
so you wake up, you stay in that groggy liminal state, and you just grab the pen.
And you write down whatever fragments remain in your awareness. Do this immediately before you think about your commute, before you plan your breakfast. Just write.
And here is the big question. What if I write down something that seems completely absurd? This brings us back to the French-speaking boss in the submarine.
Right, the nonsense.
If my goal was to gain confidence for a big presentation and I dream of a blue bicycle half buried in a desert dune, my waking logic is going to dismiss that instantly. I will just think the programming failed and I had a random neural misfire.
And that dismissal is precisely the ego failing to understand the language of the inner self.
So it's not a misfire.
No. Dream logic is rarely linear or literal. It is highly associative and symbolic. The inner self communicates through a highly personalized lexicon of imagery.
A personalized lexicon. Okay, let's decode the bicycle then.
Right.
The ego looks at the blue bicycle in the desert and sees nonsense.
But if you capture it on the page and reflect on it later, the associative meaning begins to unfold. Think about what a bicycle represents fundamentally.
A mechanism for forward momentum,
Balance.
self-propelled progress.
Exactly. And a desert. A desert represents isolation, aridity, or feeling stuck. The inner self might be illustrating the exact psychological dynamic of your work challenge.
Oh, wow.
It might be saying, you have the vehicle for momentum, your presentation skills, but you are currently applying them in an environment that drains your energy, the desert.
And maybe the blue color associates with a specific memory of childhood confidence.
Exactly. The dream is not nonsense. It is a highly compressed, symbolic diagnosis of your situation.
It's a visual poem. And if we don't capture the raw imagery immediately, we completely lose the opportunity to translate the poem.
You lose the data.
But let us return to the scenario we discussed earlier, the scenario of the blank page. The listener does the ritual tonight, wakes up, grabs the pen, and there is absolutely nothing. The memory is a void. We established earlier that the work still happened underground. How do they track that progress?
If the page remains blank, your protocol shifts from dream interpretation to daytime observation. Yes. You become a quiet witness to your own psychological state throughout the day. You look for the ripples on the surface of the water that indicate movement below.
The bleed-through we talked about.
Yes. You asked for clarity on a project. You remember no dreams. But at 2 p.m., while you are doing something entirely unrelated, perhaps just walking to your car, a sudden crystalline idea regarding the project emerges in your mind.
It just pops in.
It doesn't feel forced. It feels like it's simply arrived, fully formed. Or say you asked for emotional healing regarding a conflict. You wake up with no memory of a dream, but you notice that the tightness in your chest, that anger you have carried for weeks, is inexplicably absent.
You just feel a quiet, sturdy sense of neutrality.
Precisely. The knot was untied in the dark, and you are walking with the freedom of it in the light. You must trust that the inner self is always seeking your value fulfillment.
Wow.
The results of the sleep suggestion will manifest, whether as a vivid symbolic dream you can decode over your coffee, or as a subtle, profound shift in your waking reality later that afternoon.
Synthesizing all of this, the thinning of the veil, the laboratory of probable realities, the electromagnetic blueprints, the quiet ritual of trust, it completely upends our relationship with our own mind.
It changes everything.
We spend a third of our lives asleep. For most of us, that time is treated as a necessary blackout, a surrender to biological maintenance. But recognizing this mechanism, realizing that we are conscious collaborators with an inner self that possesses vast intelligence, it changes the fundamental architecture of our daily lives.
It really does. It's the ultimate reclamation of your own agency.
It honestly feels like I've just been handed the remote control to my own inner television. Like,
Yeah.
I don't just have to watch whatever random channel is on. I can choose the programming.
That's a perfect way to look at it. You are initiating a dialogue that spans across the dimensions of your own identity. And when you realize the sheer competency of the inner self, when you see how elegantly it responds to your gentle requests for healing, creativity, and resolution, it leaves us with an incredibly provocative question.
What's the question?
If we can consciously direct the vast machinery of the dream state from our pillows, what else are we capable of doing when the physical body sleeps?
Oh, man. That is a massive question.
Because the texts we have explored today, the foundational mechanics of sleep suggestions, they are truly just the shallow end of the pool.
The shallow end.
Yes. Once you establish this conscious communication, the Seth material points toward abilities that absolutely shatter our conventional understanding of reality. If you can focus your awareness enough to direct the dream, you can eventually focus it enough to maintain full waking consciousness while the physical body remains asleep.
Wait, you were talking about the consciousness actually stepping outside the physical vehicle.
I am talking about projection, the out-of-body experience.
Wow.
It is one of the most rigorously detailed and mind-bending concepts in Seth dreams and projections of consciousness. And the profound truth that the texts present is this. You already leave your physical body every single night when you sleep.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Every night?
Every night. It is the biological and psychological necessity. You simply do not remember it because your ego is shut down.
So the inner self travels, while the ego guards the empty house.
Exactly. But the house does not have to be empty of awareness. The very same focus, trust, and gentle intention you use to plant a sleep suggestion tonight is the exact foundational skill required to eventually wake up inside the dream, realize you are not physical, and consciously explore the non-physical environment.
That is, we are moving from sending a letter to the laboratory to actually walking through the front doors of the laboratory while fully awake.
Precisely.
That is a staggering frontier, and it is exactly where we will begin our next deep dive into these texts. We have learned the mechanics of directing the dream. Next time, we will learn the mechanics of stepping out of the physical framework entirely.
It is the natural evolution of consciousness. I can't wait.
But for tonight, the invitation to you, the listener, is clear. The chaotic, random theater of the subconscious is no longer your only option. You have the tools to initiate a real dialogue. So prepare your space tonight.
Put the phone away.
Choose your single positive focus, deliver it with gentle trust, and just allow the inner self to begin its work. Pay attention to the blank pages and the sudden insights. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we will see you next time as we venture even deeper into the unknown reality.